Okay, let's start with the first factor, the impact of Prashant Kishor, and try and make sense of the impact the Jan Swaraj Party could have. Now, the important thing for viewers to remember is that till the time PK and his party start registering a significant number of votes, it really makes not much of a material difference to what happens on the 14th. At the very least, PK's party needs to get more than 8% to start impacting the overall electoral fortune of the state. Maybe some localized impact, but on the pan-state basis, at least 8%. Anything less than that is really just one of the various players not making much of material impact. Now, the critical question with PK, and we'll see that in just a moment, is which alliance does the Jan Swaraj Party impact more? Is it hurting the Mahagathbandhan, the Muslim Yadav Saini combination more, or is it hurting the NDA more? That's the critical question. Whose votes is he taking, if at all? Now, just on a broad basis, cephalological estimates done by the NDTV electoral team suggest that at about 15% of the vote share, PK can start having a go at about 25 odd seats, somewhere in the late 20s. That is what is materially possible if his party gets about 15% of the vote share. At 18%, he could start getting more than 40 seats. And if that happens, that's when he becomes a very serious player. There's a lot of uncertainty, mystery around it, which is why we're putting it up straight in front. But remember, the BJP's hunch and their hope is this is all about pundits, it's all about the media. In the end, he will be a damn squib. So let's now take a look. For the first time, you'll see the kind of impact Prashant Kishor's party has at different vote shares. Okay, so we'll try and make sense of that. At about 8% of the vote share, and what you're seeing in the next column is the damage ratio. So if 45% of his votes come from the NDA and 55% come from the Mahagathbandhan, so if it's almost 50-50, 45-55, then the NDA, which when you adjust, remember in 2020, the Lok Jan Shakti Party contested separately. So if I just look at the current formations, add that to the data from 2020, give you an adjusted result, then it's 173 for the NDA, 69 for the Mahagathbandhan and 1 for the others. That's the baseline at which we start. Here, with 8% of the vote share, which is coming roughly equally from both formations, the NDA is very comfortably in the lead at 166, the Mahagathbandhan at 72. If Prashant Kishor's party gets 12% of the votes, and in this scenario, he's actually damaging the Gathbandhan more. 60% of his votes are coming from the Gathbandhan vote bank, 40% come from the NDA vote bank. In this case, it begins to get easier for the NDA, with the NDA tally being in this case 174 versus 55 for the Mahagathbandhan. If PK ends up at about 12% of the vote share and is divided, 30% comes from the NDA, 70% comes from the Mahagathbandhan. In this case, the NDA's tally then goes up to 187, with the Gathbandhan crashing to 42. So basically, there are two things to look at. One, what vote share does he end up with? Secondly, what is the damage ratio? Who is he damaging more? And in this first scenario, we've really looked at where he's damaging the Gathbandhan more. And in a moment from now, we'll start asking our experts who they expect PK will damage more, because the word on the street in Bihar is that the potential of him damaging the NDA is higher than that of the Gathbandhan, and we'll come to that in a moment. So let's now come to scenario 2, which is if the damage is more to the NDA. This is scenario 2. If the damage is more to the NDA, then how does this election turn? Here, 8% vote share, hypothetically for the Jan Swaraj Party, which comes 55% from the NDA, 45% from the Gathbandhan. Not much changes. The NDA still wins 166 versus 72. So if PK gets only 8% of the vote share, almost 50-50, the NDA is very comfortably placed. If PK's party goes up to 12% vote share, and this time 60% of the votes are coming from the NDA, 40% coming from the Mahagathbandhan, then the NDA tally starts to come down, 155. But remember, 123 is the magic mark. It's only if the NDA slips before 123 that they lose the election. Till then, okay, so it's irritating, it's problematic, but it's not a game changer. If PK's party gets 12% of the vote share, and this is in a ratio of 70-30, 70 coming from the NDA, 30 coming from the Mahagathbandhan, then the NDA tally comes down to 134. The Mahagathbandhan then is at 95. Still problematic. Maybe it's not a convincing victory, but it's a victory nonetheless, and that's all that matters. It is when PK's party starts moving into the 16%, 18% range, and there if 70% of the votes are coming from the NDA and only 30% from the Mahagathbandhan, that is where you then have a scenario where the NDA goes down to 114, the Mahagathbandhan at 104, and PK's party largely is the others. This is others, so broadly let's assume PK's party would be somewhere 20 plus in this scenario. It is if PK gets about 18% of the vote, and remember this is a new party in a very caste-driven state, so it's not easy for the Jan Swaraj party to go like is being depicted in scenario 2 and pick up 18% of the vote. But if that happens, then you got a scenario where the NDA tally can come down to 98, the Mahagathbandhan can be at 110, and that is problematic because that's the first scenario where the MGB actually goes ahead of the NDA. So that's a broad sense because there's been so much noise and fury, song and dance on the streets around the Jan Swaraj party. But what impact does it actually have and how does this translate into numbers, which is why we built that scenario analysis. I want to welcome our guests joining me in the studio. I've got Ajit Jha. He's been writing some cracking pieces for the NDTV website. He's been also all across our YouTube, having a good time. A lot of time spent as a print journalist, now multimedia. I see all the YouTube producers chasing you, the website asking you to write, social, television, digital, everything. Ajit, this is your home state?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm really enjoying it because I'm looking at the whole sort of elections from about 3 angles, as you rightly pointed out.
And I have Kanchan Gupta joining us as well, one of India's senior most political journalists and analysts. I want to go across first to Ravi Shankar Prasad. He treated us to the most delicious litti, mutton and choka when we were at his residence in Patna most recently. I'm massively famished and very hungry. Ravi ji, welcome. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for the most delicious meal. You know, we're looking at Bihar, and the one question we're starting this particular show off is the expectation around the damage or the impact Prashant Kishor has. We saw what the psephologists are saying in terms of vote share, conversion into seats, who he damages more. Leave all that aside. From the BJP's perspective, this is your Lok Sabha constituency of Patna. This is your home state. What's your assessment at the moment about the potential damage of the Jan Swaraj party? Ravi Shankar ji, welcome.
First of all, Rahul, I'm happy you enjoyed the mutton and also the litti. But this was for private consumption, not for public declaration on NDTV. You have created a problem for me. But I must clarify, I had to do a lot of persuasion to make you really enjoy the litti and mutton.
Sir, वो भी तो private था, वो क्यों बता रहे हो?
The limousine liberals had come from Delhi. I'm happy. Because you disclose everything. Therefore, limousine liberals do come to follow elections. I'm happy you also joined them. Well, today is a very exhausting day after nearly a month of hectic campaign, Rahul. I will be very brief. Your statistics apart, many of your observations also began with hypothetically speaking. My take as an activist in the Bihar election is that for the last nearly 25 years plus, Bihar election is clearly subdivided into forces with Lalu Prasad ji, forces with Nitish Kumar and NDA. This really started from the year 96 onwards, which further matured and concretized. Elections after elections. There have been 1-2, Nitish ji going to other side but coming back again after getting fed up with corruption. Therefore, all your statistical projections, I don't agree, to be very frank to you. I don't question your people, your statistics, your analysis. But Rahul Babu, हम भी जमीन पर रहते हैं ना, तो बिहार में जमीन को हम समझते हैं. और बिहार के लोग, PK is making a lot of noise. Good, in a democracy, every party and leader has got the right to make noise. But on the ground level, the situation is very completely settled. Who is going with whom, who is not going with whom. And the kind of statistics which you are showing is not going to be relevant at all, except to very firmly declare that the NDA is going to receive a convincing majority. And all the ground reports which we have received is that Nitish Kumar ji is also having a lot of sympathy factor which may be a little under stress in the year 2020. Therefore, all this plus Narendra Modi's impact, the two brothers Narendra Modi and Nitish Kumar, openly declaring a commitment to develop Bihar, all these sounding very, very effectively on the ground.
You know, the big hope that, and Pawan Varma ji, who's now working very closely with Prashant Kishor, is joining us. The big hope, Ravi Shankar ji, that PK's party has is that they can convert the youth and migrants into a vote bank who go beyond typical caste definitions. That because they've seen the rest of the world, they've traveled, worked in other parts of the country, therefore they are not bound by typical Muslim, Yadav, EBC, upper caste rigidities. They think differently. We saw that in Delhi with the Aam Aadmi Party being able to turn it into a class election. That's their hope. You understand Bihar well. Do you at all think, Ravi Shankar Prasad, that is possible, or do you think this is only largely going to be a castle in the air, great commentary, good for copy, but not materializing into much on the 14th?
First of all, I would like to very humbly request, don't drag me into a discussion.
Not at all.
I was told you are going to talk to me for a few minutes. After more than a month, a very exhausting campaign, today spare me, okay? Because you insisted, therefore I have come for a few minutes. Let me explain what I am trying to highlight. This kind of projections is not new. They do come. I welcome Mr. Prashant Kishor making a lot of noise, efforts. But the more he makes the noise, the more the choices becomes clear. He is also forced to acknowledge the corruption of Lalu Prasad, the misrule, the impact of Jungle Raj. Therefore, whom to go? If that is also being articulated repeatedly by Mr. Prashant Kishor, which we have seen, reported widely, therefore who is the choice? And ultimately, Nitish ji, I must tell you, it is a matter of great political insight and analysis. After 20 years in power, Nitish ji has maintained his simplicity without any taint. And if I can tell you what is happening on the ground, Nitishwa theek hai, theek kaam kar hai. You must try to understand what is resonating on the ground. If you are not able to go that, all this cacophony of television and all this report, etc. इसलिए मैं थोड़ा आपसे गुजारिश करूंगा कि जब आप इतने सेमिनल इशू को डिस्कस कर रहे हैं तो थोड़ा अम्बल सिंपल बिहारी के simple, humble understanding को भी समझिए, articulate करिए.
No, absolutely. While there is a certain community of older people who saw Jungle Raj and therefore are petrified by the spectre of the return of Lalu Raj, there is a young generation that has seen what's happening in Bangalore, they've seen what's happening in Mumbai, they've seen what's happening in Delhi and elsewhere, and they see how their state has been left behind. My question, Ravi Shankar ji, was, are you concerned that these youth voters need not necessarily ascribe to traditional thoughts around how communities vote? Would they potentially be tempted to think about voting for change? Because they've only seen in their 20 years as adults, they've only really seen the Nitish Raj. They haven't seen anything else and they've seen what's happening elsewhere. That's the question, that's the context.
That question is relevant, I don't deny that. But they have also a family. And the curse of Jungle Raj, if they had not suffered individually, their families have suffered, their parents have suffered, their uncles have suffered, and the story is communicated. You know, Rahul, when we were fighting the fodder scam, late Sushil Modi, Sarju Rai, Lalan Singh also joined. I need to tell you at some point in time at pleasure what kind of suffering we had to undergo, the kind of threat we had to suffer. But we held on. And today, since you are talking about, don't forget one thing, Rahul Kanwal, Lalu Prasad ji is convicted for 32.5 years in 4 separate cases. With Tejasvi Yadav, it stands charge framed under section 420 of the Penal Code for looting public money. If that is the case, then all the younger generation J also thinks about what is the potential, what is the alternative. Therefore, these questions, if you are not able to address properly, you will be doing great injustice to the young people. They have a mind. The social media is so impactful. They go through everything. We're just talking with Ajit Jha about the impact of social media. They go through everything. Therefore, what is the alternative, they would like to ask? If the alternative is Tejasvi Yadav, I regret that is not a tangible or an encouraging alternative.
Well, you've had a tough day.
And if at all, for the sake of argument, I tend to accept. Huh?
Go on, complete what you're saying, sir.
Sorry?
Go on, complete your argument, sir.
I was just telling that hypothetically speaking, what you just recounted in your analysis about PK's vote, that also substantially is leaning towards a massive majority for the NDA.
No,
but that is only hypothetically speaking. We know on the ground, the battle lines are drawn and we are going to make a decisive comeback once again.
Okay. Ravi Shankar ji, you had a hectic month of pitched campaigning. Thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate your thoughts. We look forward to seeing you on the first phase, then the second, and then on exit poll and counting day. And I look forward to more litti mutton and chuka.
But I thought, on a lighter note, Rahul Kanwal, I hope you relaxed in my house, didn't you?
बहुत आनंद आया सर, बहुत आनंद. We had a super long day. We started at 7, finished with the Home Minister at 9:30. This was the perfect way to unwind after a hectic and long day of election reportage, not campaigning, but reportage. And thank you so much for your hospitality then and for joining us on NDTV Battleground right now. Thank you, sir. Wish you all the best. So that was Ravi Shankar Prasad. What I'll do now is give you another set of analysis on the impact of Prashant Kishor, because this, as I said, is really, you could call him the X factor, you could call him the joker in the pack, the one big unknown which will determine what happens on the 14th. Now this data is by Amitabh Tiwari, who also comes from Bihar, knows more than a thing or two about his own home state, and therefore is trying to look at what's happening in Bihar from that lens. So let's take a look at the data. This is compiled by Amitabh Tiwari. This is just the base figure, right? If you adjust for actuals, it's 42% for NDA, 39% for the Gathbandhan. This is how it actually was, but then, as I said earlier, Chirag Paswan was fighting separately. So this is the base figure he starts from, and then he's building out different scenarios. Let's take the first scenario, this by psephologist and analyst Amitabh Tiwari. Now, in scenario 1, he's saying Jan Swaraj gets 10% of the votes. Here, if 5% comes from the Gathbandhan and 5% comes from the others, remember what 26% did not vote either for the Gathbandhan or for the NDA. These are the others. He's saying he picks 5%. In this scenario, he's not suggesting PK damage the NDA. Here again, it's a clear victory. If there's an 8% gap between the Gathbandhan and the NDA, it's game over. It's a sweep, a decisive sweep for the NDA. Let's now come to scenario 2. In scenario 2, Amitabh Tiwari projects that he's picking up 5% of the vote from the NDA and 5% from the others. So if 5% comes from the NDA, then the Gathbandhan gets to 39% of the vote share. The NDA gets to 37% of the vote share, which means it will be a tight election. The Gathbandhan typically has concentrated votes in Bihar. This scenario would give the Gathbandhan the edge. The Jan Swaraj party at 10% would have some impact on seats, 10% overall pan-state vote share, but not much of an impact on seats across the state. Here, the Gathbandhan goes through if 5% of the votes come from the NDA. Let's now come to scenario 3. Scenario 3 is 10% vote share, 5% coming from the others, and he picks up equally from the Gathbandhan and the NDA. 2.5% are NDA supporters, 2.5% are Gathbandhan supporters, which means he's damaging both. In this scenario, the NDA is at 36%, the Gathbandhan at 36%. In this scenario, again, the NDA, it won't be a landslide decisive victory, but it will be enough for the NDA to win. A 3% vote share gap is typically enough to cross the victory margin, but it won't be the 2010 type of result, which was the historic best of the NDA previously. So these are the three scenarios which has been put together by Amitabh Tiwari, and I want to go across now to Amitabh Tiwari to try and get him to explain, because these are scenario building. Now you've been traveling the state, Amitabh, this is your Janpad as it were, and therefore leave the scenarios aside for a moment. Of what you've understood of what's happening on the ground, which of these scenarios is most likely to actually come true? Whose votes is he damaging more, and to what extent? Amitabh.
No, so clearly, since Bihar has a history of around 20% vote share to others, what Prashant Kishor has done is that he has emerged as the CM face of the voters who have been voting for other smaller parties and independents. So I am pretty sure that he is likely to inflict the highest damage to others, which is consolidating the vote of others, sort of a third front, which you can categorize as an anti-NDA or an anti-Mahagathbandhan vote, because they now see an institutional force, a face, they get a face who can take on both the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan. Now there are, if you see where is he getting traction from, clearly youth is one section where he is getting traction from, largely the 18 to 24 or 18 to 30 category youth, and there I see he is fairly getting traction from around 12 to 15% voters. Now that you can say is an opportunity loss for the NDA, for the Mahagathbandhan, because Tejasvi Yadav has emerged also as a choice of the youth, highlighting unemployment as one of the key issues, and in 2020 the youth have backed him largely on a promise of creating jobs of around 10 lakh. But when you see as the social profile of the voters of Jan Suraaj, you see that the highest traction he is getting is also amongst the upper caste, because the upper caste also see an opportunity or hope that they can get a chief minister from their community after 35 years. And this is also one of the reasons precisely that the NDA or the top leadership, which is the Prime Minister and the Home Minister, are not clearly announcing or saying that Nitish could be the CM, because 1/3 of BJP voters largely do not want to see Nitish as CM and comprise of a large section of upper caste, and Jan Suraaj has put up 92 upper caste and Baniya community candidates. So there is a fear amongst the BJP also that these voters, like in 2020, had veered to the LJP, could veer towards the Jan Suraaj. So largely upper caste, a section of Muslims and Dalits, and if you see the economic or socio-economic profile, it's largely again the middle class, educated educated middle class, because he is highlighting corruption, and also a section of the poor because he is also raising issues of healthcare.
अरे आप तो इतना बोल रहे हो जैसे सभी वोट
His game is largely predicated on the 83 seats.
You've given so many different communities.
नहीं अभी आ रहे हैं ना, तो essentially क्या है, essentially क्या है कि he is not likely to win this elections, correct? So he is likely to play the role of a spoiler, just like the LJP did in 2020 elections, damaging both the NDA and the Mahagathbandhan. There are 83 seats where the victory margin was less than equal to 5% in 2020. 37 won by NDA and 38 won by Mahagathbandhan, 7 by others. If on these seats he gets 5% plus vote share, he is likely to damage the prospects of either of the parties. So he is likely to play the role of a spoiler in this election. The better Jan Suraaj does, the closer will be the election. The worse Jan Suraaj does, the election could also go one-sided.
Okay, that's very interesting from Amitabh Tiwari. Two critical points to remember there. One, that he's likely to impact the others. About 25% of the vote wasn't NDA, wasn't MGB. He's saying that's where the maximum, whatever he gets, that's where the maximum percentage comes from. The second point he makes is that the better he does, the more exciting the result on the 14th of November. The worse he does, which is what the BJP is hoping, then the sooner we can all go back home on the 14th and eat some litti mutton and choka, because that election will then be over in one way or the other. Okay, so that is the impact of Prashant Kishor, and who better than Pawan Varma to explain on the ground the impact that this is having, because Pawan Varma, a well-known diplomat, author, writer, politician, worked with Nitish Kumar, has now been working very, very closely with Prashant Kishor, is now a part of his party. I have Sanjay Jha joining us, and I have Subhrashta joining us, and we have Manish Varma from the Janata Dal United. And in a moment from now, I'll have Sachin Pilot, senior leader of the Congress, joining us as well. But I want to go across to Pawan Varma first. Mr. Varma, you know, this idea, as we traveled through Muzaffarpur, Vaishali, Patna, different parts of the first phase, what I found was that there was a certain traction amongst the youth in particular, but they also were apprehensive that their vote may go waste, because PK this time is not likely to win. That yes, he's made some song and dance, he's raised the right issues, he's made some impact, but vote waste nahi karna hai. And therefore, all these crores of social media impressions which your young energetic team was talking about in the Jan Swaraj Professionals unit, where you're doing all your IPAC style social media and digital analytics, that may be very strong on YouTube, it may be very strong on digital, but the concern is that this might not amount to too many seats come counting day.
Well, Rahul, let me say that what Ravi Shankar Prasad was calling noise is a quiet revolution unfolding under his very feet on the ground, which he claims to know but is out of touch with. And I can say what you're calling a song and dance is actually pretty much the same thing. You have to understand that Jan Swaraj is not a spoiler in this election, because you're seeing the voting patterns of this election from the prism of previous elections, where essentially it was a bipolar contest between two coalitions. Jan Swaraj is now commanding the majority constituency in Bihar, cutting across caste and religion, which is the constituency for change. And that cuts across the caste hierarchies and religion and commands, above all, the bulk of the youth. And Bihar's demography is such that 58% of Bihar are below, the population is below the age of 35. Also, the issues that he has raised, the blueprint that he has provided, is appealing to the poor and marginalized voters who for 30 years have not had an alternative and are looking at the Jan Swaraj as an alternative which can provide them a moksha from these coalitions which have done very little on the ground for them. So therefore, quit this analysis about 5%, 8%, 10%, 12%. In my view, given the fact that at least 28% of Biharis have not ever voted for the two coalitions in the past, and if he hives off at the very minimum 10% from both the coalitions, you are looking at the possibility of Jan Swaraj, whom you call a spoiler and Ravi Shankar Prasad calls a noise, and whom you also said is just creating a song and dance on social media, to be actually veering towards the 40% vote. And you will see it happening on the...
Once again, I must say very clearly that if Jan Swaraj gets 40% vote share, it would be an electoral record of a kind that Bihar hasn't seen. It's highly unlikely.
Said that it was going to change.
Highly improbable. He's worked very hard. It's happened once in Delhi, where in 2013 the AAP suddenly burst to the fore, captured a lot of imagination, won even more in 2015. Prabhu Chawla joins us. Prabhu, do you think that's possible? Pawan Varma is now working very closely with PK. He's convinced it's possible. But Delhi was about class. Bihar is typically about caste. Can that change in this election?
Both PK and Varma have been part of the JDU establishment earlier. They must be knowing what is wrong with them and what is right with them. Since they are insiders, they must be knowing what is the problem facing there. Because I want to say only one thing. For me, Prashant Kumar may be a good manager. I've seen him working in Gujarat. He is not a leader people will accept him easily. He doesn't come like a leader. He comes like a person who can manage things better.
But he's been, as we were just hearing from Pawan, he's been getting a lot of crowds. I traveled with him in certain places. Despite the rain, he was attracting crowds. That's not in question. The question is, will those crowds turn into votes?
No, the question is, he has been there in politics for the last, when he joined Nitish Kumar, he has been there. Sure. So he knows how to collect the crowd. If he can collect the crowd for Modi and create an environment, he's expert of creating that. So I'm saying whether he converts into votes, that's the question we have to wait and watch. As somebody put it, that the research was done in Bihar, for example, 70% of the opinion poll exit was wrong. Sure. It was the only state where everything has been wrong. If he was so expert, so he would have won election for all the elections which he was campaigning.